Welcome back to the next episode of TMT with Mike O'Reilly. My guest, Rosa Mendoza of the, let me get this correct, okay? The founder, president, and CEO of Alvanza.
That is correct, absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So let's start our conversation with some easy ones. We got the opportunity to work or to know each other when I was at the FCC and you were an advocate on the outside. I'd like to know a little bit more, what brought you to DC? What got you to this point?
And yes, we met more than 7 years ago, correct? Time really does fly. And by the way, thank you so much for your leadership when you were at the FCC. Very much needed. So I appreciated working with you and your staff and your office on issues of mutual interest. And thank you again for having me and for the opportunity. What brought me to DC, what brought me to this area, I grew up in Washington State. Go Seahawks. As you can imagine, I'm very happy with the results of the Super Bowl. I went to Washington State University, so go Cougs, a proud Washingtonian here. But I've been in the area going on 19 years this summer, so this is home for me. I do support the local teams as well, but only when they don't play against my Seahawks, of course. So what brought me to this area is that I was always interested in learning more about, our political system, policy issues, and stuff like that. And when I was at WSU, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in communication, but like the typical student, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I wanted to go to law school, but at the same time, I wanted to get a master's degree in political science. And then, of course, also like the typical student, I ended up getting a master's degree in higher education administration. So completely different than what I thought I wanted, right? And I did that because I worked for the university for a year and I loved what I did. And so I decided to get a master's degree also from WSU in higher education administration. But I always wanted to learn more about our political system, about policy. So I was like, I still want to do that. So my roommate at the time, she was from DC. Her mother worked for one of the government agencies, I forget which one. And she came to visit her mother in the summertime. So I was like, I want to check DC out because I'm still very interested in politics, not running for office, but again, policy behind what policymakers do. And so I decided to visit her. And I liked the city, and I was like, I'm still very interested in being involved in these issues, so I decided to move out here. And again, 19 years later, I'm still here. So this is home now.
And when you get down different jobs, you like the rest of us, you moved up, and now you are the head of Alvanza.
Alvanza.
Did I get that right?
And I'll explain the name for your audience.
Please,
so Alvanza is all, right, as in everyone, and then the word in Spanish, Avanza, which means move forward. So the idea is that we all move forward with technology and innovation. So Alvanza.
What's your mission? What do you hope to do?
So the mission is very simple. And in fact, I'll mention why I started the organization because I think it's important. I've been completely fascinated, especially in the last couple of years, with how technology and innovation have changed the way we do everything, right? The way we learn, the way we communicate with family and friends. I mean, literally every aspect of our lives has changed because of technology and innovation. I can pick up my phone right now and order groceries and they will be delivered at home before we even finish this interview, right? I can order a car service if I want to. So the way technology has changed our lives, it's impressive. And I've been fascinated, a little bit nervous sometimes, but fascinated with the changes and how it has impacted us and changed the way we live. So because of that, I believe that we need voices, right? Voices that can speak from the consumer perspective about how these innovation policy issues impact all Americans and all communities and all consumers. And there's not a lot of groups that do this type of work. So I was like, we need an organization, a nonprofit that can fully focus on these issues. And that's why I started Alvanza. Our mission is very simple, very straightforward. Our mission is to ensure that all Americans, especially our youth, can have an opportunity to succeed in our innovation and technology-based society. Because again, as a society, we very much depend on technology, right? I wouldn't be able to do my job if it wasn't because I have access to technology. So it's so important. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And again, I believe that we need voices that can educate policymakers about how these issues in this space impact consumers and Americans.
Do you find yourself spending more time on advocacy or events, or is it press or media? Is it all of the above?
It's all the above. I do plenty of events. I do plenty of advocacy work. We spend quite a quite some time educating policymakers, again, about how the issues that they're working on impact your average American underserved communities, and all communities for that matter. So yes, a lot of advocacy work, a lot of events, policy briefs, whatever it makes sense, right, at the moment, but we do all of the above.
And does your organization, you said it's a nonprofit, does it receive money from the government, or is it private sources, or how do you generally organize?
It's a small nonprofit, and we do not get any government funding, never have. The funding that we have comes from generous donations of the private sector.
What makes an event successful in your mind? What really brings out the talent that you need, the voice that you're trying to get to?
I think, in my opinion, what makes a successful event, and especially in this area, you have to consider the subject, right? There's some subjects, obviously, that are more interesting than others. It depends on the speakers that you bring to your event, right? Some speakers can attract a large crowd, others not so much. It depends on the time and the date in which you do your event. As you know, a lot of what we do in the DMV, especially in DC, depends on what's happening on Capitol Hill, right? So I take all those things into consideration when I organize Alvanza events.
Would you rather have a big event or one that really hits home with, that really is effective on a policymaker that's really into the weeds?
I prefer quality over quantity. So if I can educate even one policymaker on a key issue, then that's my goal, right? So yes, I focus on, what the goal is, right? Who are we trying to educate? Because I do policy-related events, educational events. All my events are educational and policy-focused. So yes, quality over quantity for sure.
Okay. In our background, we had a chance to talk. You were very interested at the time and still are on Latino issues and the Latino community. Do you think that the technology and communications industries are responsive to the size and economic power from those communities?
Yes, thank you for asking. That is a very important issue to me. It will always be. I think it's extremely important that we understand that Latinos are a very important American community, right? And in fact, if I'm remembering correctly, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has reported and reports that Latino businesses and consumers combined add about, I think if I'm remembering correctly, is $4.1 trillion to the U.S. economy. This clearly highlights the fact that the Latino community is a very important community and that we contribute a lot to the country's economic success, right? Economic growth. But not only do we contribute to the country's economic growth, but we contribute in every way, shape, and form, right, to the country's success. So it's very important that we don't other the Latino community, right? That we don't see it as the others. We need to see the Latino community for what it is, an American community, a community that has contributed greatly from the country's inception and will continue to contribute, right? So it's important that we pay the proper attention, right? So if these companies, you mentioned technology and telecommunications companies, some pay attention to the Latino community properly, others do not. But my advice to all companies, regardless of what sector they are in, is that they should pay attention, the proper attention to the Latino community, because again, not only do we contribute to the country's economic success, but we contribute in every way, shape, and form. And the Latino community is a community that is very young, right? And you need that in order to have the next generation take on the next jobs that we need in order for the country to move forward. So in my opinion, if we leave the Latino community behind, we are going to leave the future of America behind, right? So it's important that all industries, all companies, pay the proper attention to every community for that matter, right? We can't leave anybody behind, but especially the Latino community because of its size, because of how important it is, because of the many contributions that we make, have made, and will continue to make.
Do Latino community consumers, do they tend to be responsive? Do they recognize that industries and companies are paying attention to them, or that's not a factor in their purchasing power?
I believe.
Did I say that right? Are they mindful that companies are paying attention?
We are mindful.
Responsive?
Absolutely, we are mindful, and it does matter, right? We're a very loyal consumer group. So if we believe and know that companies are paying the proper attention and providing the right services for the community, then we are very loyal and will get services from that specific company, right? So we are a very loyal consumer group. And we do care and we do mind that they pay the proper attention and that the services and products that they're offering are products and services that can benefit us, right? So yes.
There's a very big financial
Absolutely.
aspect to the equation. Okay. Talk a little bit about the policy issues your organization spends its time on. What motivates you? What captivates your attention on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
We focused on quite a few important key policy issues, but one of the main issues that we focus on is ensuring that all Americans have access to broadband. As I mentioned when we started this conversation, I am truly fascinated with how technology and innovation have changed the way we live. And because of that, a lot of the work that we do is ensuring that, again, all Americans, all communities have access to broadband, right? Because it's extremely important. I wouldn't be able to do my job if it wasn't for having this access, right? In fact, at this point in 2026, we can barely survive, without access. Certainly we cannot succeed because the vast majority of jobs require you to have some sort of access to online resources, to the internet, right? In order for you to be able to do your job or communicate with your colleagues or your boss or whatever. So it's extremely important. Again, as I mentioned, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. However, when it comes to this issue, it's important that we provide the infrastructure, right? We as a country. It's important that we provide the infrastructure for everyone to have the access, but it's also important that we ensure that all Americans have the skills that they need in order for them to be able to use this access. Because, even if we succeed in closing the digital divide and we give every American access to broadband and every corner and every community of the U.S. has access, there's a lot of folks that don't have the skills for them to be able to go online. And a community that stands out to me when it comes to that issue is the elderly community. They don't have the skills to be able to navigate the online world successfully, right? And so the elderly community is often the target of scams because they don't, maybe they put their information in a website that is not a trusted source, a trusted website. And their information gets stolen, right? And so then they obviously are impacted negatively. So it's important that we educate all consumers, or all Americans, about how they can navigate the online world safely. So this issue of closing the digital divide is not only providing the infrastructure, right, which we should, and we should allow the companies that are trying to provide the infrastructure to do it, because sometimes, as you know, policymakers get in the way with regulations that are unnecessary and prevent these companies that are trying to provide the infrastructure in all communities from doing so. So it's important that we allow them, give them freedom to be able to deploy the infrastructure in every community, but that we educate all Americans about how to use this, how to benefit from the resources available online.
How do we increase that, for lack of a better word, skill level? How do you, there was nothing you could do to help my mom, to rest her soul. She was going to be a bad, elderly lady, was never going to be, effective on communication technology and the internet. But many others can. How do you increase the skill level?
It is difficult, especially with the elderly community. My parents are in the same situation. My parents, thank God, have access to broadband. They're doing fine, but they don't have the skills, right? So it is difficult to get them to understand the relevance of this, right? So I think one of the most important things we can do, obviously, offer programs at the community level. But one of the most important things that we can do, in my opinion, as a parent is, for example, I know that there's some Latinos, right, that work in jobs that don't necessarily require the use of the internet, right? Like I'm thinking of the farm worker that works in the fields. Perhaps that person doesn't need the internet to do his or her job, but their children need it to do their homework, right? So even that is important to ensure that they understand why it matters, why it's relevant to have broadband access at home, so that even if you don't need it to do your job, your children need it to do their homework, right? I mean, I don't know of any school or any teacher that doesn't assign homework that doesn't require the use of the internet nowadays, right? So it's important that we, again, provide the infrastructure, provide programs that can help people learn the skills they need to navigate the online world, but it's also important so that everyone understands the relevance of having this access, right?
Do you spend time on affordability? to be honest, I just wrote a piece on affordability and highlighted the benefits of broadband costs and capabilities, but there's always going to be some portion of the population where they're going to be challenged economically, right?
Sure.
Do you spend time on different programs that have come and gone? Some exist now, some have existed in the past?
You know, affordability, excuse me, will continue to unfortunately be an issue, which is why we heavily supported programs like the ACP that we no longer have, because programs like that really benefited those that don't have the resources to be able to get these services. I do got to give kudos to the ISPs that have programs is specifically for folks that are not able to afford these type of services, right? And I know there's a lot of companies that do. Comcast is one, Charter, T-Mobile. I think most of the ISPs offer some sort of program for low-income communities, which is very important, and I do give them kudos for that.
I noticed that you wrote a white paper on online education. Why is that so important to you, and what were you hoping to get? What message were you hoping to send with that piece?
Thank you for asking that, because it's a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. So yes, Alvanza's white paper focuses on the importance of online learning, but it also focuses on the importance of us as a country supporting partnerships between universities and colleges and online program managers. So online program managers are third-party entities that come in and help colleges and universities create and run successful online programs. Why is this important? Obvious reasons, right? For me, as a first-generation college student, it's very important that we give all Americans an opportunity to be able to get a degree online if they choose to, right? So me, as a mother, I'm thinking of the single mother who cannot leave her community, who cannot stop working because she needs her job to provide for her child, and can move away, right, to go to a campus and get a 4-year degree, right? Or I'm thinking of the single father or the non-traditional student that wants to get a 4-year degree but can't leave their home or their community to be able to go to a campus and get a 4-year degree, right? So it's important that online learning be available for all Americans, right, in every college and every university. The problem is especially smaller universities don't have the resources to be able to launch these programs on their own. So they need the help from OPMs, right, that come in and say, we can provide the infrastructure, we can, market this new program, we can get you the students. So they provide a wonderful benefit to these, especially, again, smaller colleges and universities. The other focus and the other part of why these partnerships is important is that these partnerships, as you know, we are at a point in our country where we need to train Americans for the jobs of the future. And these partnerships help with that, right? Because these partnerships, especially the partnerships between OPMs and community college, they focus on strengthening skills-based workforce programs, right? So they focus on giving Americans the skills that they need for the local businesses in their communities, right? So I have a brother that always tells me, because I'm a huge fan of pushing everybody to get a 4-year degree. And he's always like, Rosa, not everybody can get a college degree. And not everybody wants to get a college degree, the traditional 4-year college degree, right? And he's absolutely right. It's not doable for every American. It's not realistic for every American. It's not what every American needs, right? Like, I'm thinking, I mentioned to you, I grew up in Washington State. And I know for a fact that there's a lot of people in my small community in Central Washington that don't necessarily need a 4-year college degree, right? That they much rather go to the community college that we do have in our city, because we don't have a university, it's a small town. So they much rather go to the community college, learn some skills that the local employer needs, right? And they can get a job, get the training that they need, skill-specific training, get a job, and then maybe start their own business, right? So that benefits everyone. It benefits the individual that is getting the skills. It benefits the business owner that needs skilled workers, and it benefits the community by having a successful business in the community, right? So it's a win-win for everyone. So these partnerships, and the reason why I did this white paper is to ensure that everybody understands what's happening, right? These partnerships between OPMs and colleges and universities are providing all these resources. The issue comes when, again, some policymakers try to get in the way of these innovative partnerships, and they shouldn't, right? It's like, these partnerships are needed. They're important, they're innovative, they're helping all Americans. So again, they help the person that wants to do a career change and wants to get a 4-year degree in something else, right? because now they don't have to leave their community. They can just online, they can work their job, take care of their kids, and then take classes at night, online at night, right? Or something like that. Or they can help the young man that wants to, again, eventually own his own business in his community and doesn't want to leave his community and wants to just go to the community college, get specific skills, then get a job, get training, and then start his own business, right? So it's just partnerships that are very, very beneficial, and I want policymakers to understand that we shouldn't get in the way of these partnerships.
When you say get in the way, what's the rub? What are they trying to do?
Well, sometimes they basically just regulate too much, right? Unnecessary regulation that gets in the way of these partnerships, flourishing. So no need for that.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about a policy issue of the now and the future. One of the hottest topics in DC is artificial intelligence. In reading your materials on your organization's website, I know it's a focus for yours. Where do you fall on the concerns about artificial intelligence? There are not a number of doomsday philosophers out there that it's going to, lead to humans being taken over. Where do you fall in terms of, is it beneficial for society versus the safety angle?
Sure. I am a huge, huge fan of technology and innovation. I have greatly benefited from the advancements that we've seen, especially in the last 20 years, right? I do, however, think that we should be very careful when we develop these new innovations in AI, right? It should be developed responsibly to ensure that we minimize the risks, right? And to ensure that we can benefit from these new innovations. So I think AI should be developed responsibly, but I don't think we should get in the way of innovation, right? All of us have benefited from this. And in fact, whether we like it or not, innovation is going to keep moving forward. I don't see us as a society going back and using less technology and less innovation. It's not going to happen. Right? It's moving fast, it's moving forward, whether we like it or not. So what I believe we should do, what I try to do with Alvanza, we at Alvanza, try to educate, especially young folks, about what this means to them, right? How AI impacts them in their daily lives. I do workshops with young folks. That's part of what we do. We have a mentoring program. And I do workshops and I educate young Americans about the many opportunities in the innovation space, right? Because a lot of folks don't understand about these opportunities. If I go back, and I actually want to do this and will at some point, if I go back to the community where I grew up in Washington State, and I know that if I speak with middle school and high school students, and if I say to them, do you think you can get a job at X, Y, and Z big American technology company? I'm afraid, especially if I speak with young folks from underserved communities, I'm afraid that the answer is going to be no. Not because they're not able to do it, not because they're not smart enough, but because they see it as something completely unattainable, or they don't fully understand the work that these companies do, or the opportunities in these companies, right? So it's very important that we educate young Americans about the opportunities in the innovation industry, in the technology companies, in the telecommunication companies. And so I do that, right? I educate them. I'm like, do you like playing video games? And most especially young guys, right? Yes. I'm like, well, you can create your own video game. And this is how you can do it. You can get a degree in X, Y, and Z and work for X, Y, and Z company, and you can then create your own video games. And it's a lot more exciting for them to say, yes, I want to go to college, or yes, I want to go to a technical school and do X, Y, and Z, because they see a path, right? They see something attainable as opposed to just, do you want to work for X, Y, and Z company, and they don't even know what that company does, right? So it's important that we educate them about the opportunities. It's important that we educate them about how AI works and how it impacts them on a regular basis, how it's going to continue to impact them, how it's going to impact the jobs that the future of work, the jobs that are now available, that are going to be available in the future. I try to also instill a mindset of try to be producer, not just consumers, right? I want young Americans to understand that they should just use technology, sure, right, and use it to their advantage. I do, but I want them to be the next generation of leaders and innovators, right? I want American companies to have a strong pipeline of young Americans that have the skills for the jobs that are currently available, and for the jobs that are going to be available in the future.
So, if I take your point, is it one of the avenues that artificial intelligence can address the needs of some users and make it easier to enter the workforce or to adopt technology because it can, provide a platform. It can write code. It can do a number of different things for the consumer side, while at the same time addressing issues on the enterprise side that we'll all take advantage of.
Absolutely. I think it has facilitated many of the things that we do, and it has provided great benefits. But again, we need to be responsible with how we develop it, right? But yes, it has provided a lot of benefits.
And maybe it's a good segue. What's your perspective on, I'll call it digital health? Sometimes people call it telehealth. That might be a subset, depending on one's perspective. What's your take on the importance of digital health nationwide in the Latino community or elsewise? What are the benefits, and has it helped increase the healthiness of Americans?
We at Alvanza work in the intersection of innovation and healthcare, right? So yes, digital health, telehealth are issues that we focus on, that we discuss. And again, I think the advances that we've seen in the healthcare industry greatly benefit the Latino community and all Americans for that matter, right? The issue with this is that this is directly tied to Americans having access to broadband. So if you don't have access to broadband, how are you going to take advantage of digital health, of telehealth? And of all the advances that we've seen in the healthcare industry, and in every industry for that matter, right, you won't be able to. So this is directly tied to the importance of having that access. But yes, to your point, I do believe that telehealth, digital health, and all those advances in the healthcare industry benefit Latinos for sure.
And is there a way to incorporate the technology into whether it's facilities or clinics or elsewise that would really expand its use, right? Definitely parts of America don't have doctors or don't have doctors often. Certainly in more rural communities, we've had a huge problem when I was in the FCC. We had a huge problem we recognized in terms of having babies being born without proper doctors and accreditation. How do you address that issue? Telehealth is not going to solve all of that, but
it won't. But it will greatly help. Exactly, especially rural communities, which we forget about sometimes, right? And we cannot, because it's communities that very much need these services and can benefit from these services, right? We don't need a mother that is pregnant and needs to do a routine check with the doctor. Maybe some of these checks can be done online, right? And we want to provide that opportunity for that person. So.
Interesting. Where do you fall on one of the hottest policy issues that's been out there for quite a while? I'll call it the preemption issue, or the issue of state and local regulation of, arguably, I would say, interstate communications and technology and innovation. That states have been very creative on artificial intelligence, on privacy, on a bunch of different policy issues where the federal government hasn't acted, but they are interstate services, right? You can be anywhere and run a telephone company. The old voice network, you could be here and operate in California or nationwide. You can do the same with almost any other service. You can be a streamer anywhere you want. You can be a content creator. There's so many different things you can do from your living room. You don't have to travel as much, but that makes it interstate, commerce. And we have this jurisdictional pull. Where do you fall on that? There's kind of the camp of like, we need more eyes on policy, and state involvement can help, or you've got a problem in multiple layers created by multiple jurisdictions.
I do not support state-by-state regulation. I don't support it because it creates a lot of confusion, it's inconsistent, and when it comes to the privacy issue, for example, it doesn't properly protect consumers, right? So I support federal legislation, national framework for the privacy issue. I think states don't always get it right, and again, it doesn't properly protect consumers when it comes to the privacy issue. And in fact, we at Alvanza recently did a national survey on the child safety issue. And hopefully I'm going to remember the numbers of the survey correctly, the survey results, excuse me. And I believe it's 82% of voters across partisan lines and 85% of parents approve legislation in line with the App Store Accountability Act, for example, right? So this act, if enacted, it would provide a federal sort of framework at the national level. And this would mean that if I'm a teenager and I want to download an app, when I go to the App Store, it's going to ask me for my age, right? I have to verify my age. And it's going to send a notification to my parents. And my parents are going to be like, yes, you can download that app, or absolutely not, you cannot, right? Because it's not appropriate for you as a teenager. And this is extremely important because if we do this at the national level, then teens are going to be protected. If we do this state by state, there's going to be so much confusion, and teens are digital natives, which means they're going to be like, well, this app requires me to verify my information, so therefore I'm not going to download this app. But guess what? This other one doesn't, so I'm going to download this app, right? So kids are going to get around that. So, state by state regulations do not protect young adults properly, right? Children and young adults properly. So we need a federal sort of law, national framework that can actually protect teens when they go online. So it was interesting. I wasn't surprised, but it was interesting to see that most parents and most voters, again, regardless of the political party, support a national framework, and they support legislation in line with the App Store Accountability Act. And I'd be more than happy to share those results with you so you can share them with your audience as well.
And I'm not involved in that law, or that law to be potentially. What is there concern that kids are really creative?
Exactly.
And my kids are creative, and whatever rule or structure I put down in my house, they can find someone else's house who's not as responsible. Maybe. So are we? Australia has a new age verification structure and trying to ban social media for certain ages, and the kids have said, "Do what you want. We're still going to take advantage of the technology."
Correct. Which is exactly why we can't just put the responsibility on the companies, for example, right? We're vilifying American companies, like, oh my God, these social media companies. No, let's not do that. Let's not attack American companies. Let's not vilify social media companies, right? They're doing their best to try to protect all users. But we also need to put the responsibility on the parents, right? Because you're right. Even if we do everything we can as a society, as policymakers, as companies, right? Even if we do everything right, kids are digital natives. They're going to figure out a way to get around all that, right? So we also need to ensure the parents understand that, and the parents provide the right protection at home, the right guidance more than anything at home to say, look, you're not allowed to consume X, Y, and Z content because it's not appropriate for you, right? I grew up in a very, very strict, conservative, traditional family. And my father was very good, and my mom too, at saying, no, you're not going to do that, right? And we need more of that. We can't just, put all the responsibility on the companies and just the parents have no responsibility. They should have some responsibility. They should ensure that they guide their teens, their children in the right direction so that they can be cautious as to what they consume, right?
Let's revert back to an issue on broadband access. One of the interesting things that has happened and benefits of the work of the administration has been to make the BEAD program more cost effective, and it's produced a number of savings. There's a pot of money, and everyone's trying to figure out what to do with it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's my understanding that the money is not going to go back to Treasury, but it's going to be dispersed. All I can say is that I hope the policymakers can work together and that they can work with all stakeholders, including the companies that are trying to provide the infrastructure, to ensure that we serve the unserved communities before we do anything with that money, right? And I want them to be cautious and ensure that we avoid any waste, fraud, and abuse, right? We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally close the digital divide, right? And these funds can help with that. But if we don't use them correctly, if we overbuild in areas that already have service, then we're wasting the money, right? We need to make sure that we identify the communities that do not have service, especially rural communities, right? And we got to make sure that we build in those communities, right? Again, why overbuild in areas that already have it, right? So we got to be very careful. We got to make sure that we, track every dollar to ensure that it's spent wisely. Because if we're going to spend taxpayers' money, then we got to spend it the right way so it can benefit all Americans, so it can benefit our country, so our country can continue to move forward and lead in innovation.
I speak the truth there. One last question, and I'll let you go. When you look out 5, 10, 20 years on communications issues, where do you think we're going in terms of how the Latino community, how all Americans are treated in terms of how technology approaches them, rather than singular out? You mentioned earlier that we're all one part of a conversation, but they do need to be attentive to different voices. When you look out, do you see a universe where we no longer have those divisional lines, and it's one big melting pot, and the differences are less than the similarities?
I sure do hope so. I do hope so. I hope that policymakers can understand that they should push forward legislation that benefits all Americans, right? Legislation that can help all of us make our country successful, to ensure that our country can not only compete in the global stage, but succeed and continue to lead in every sector for that matter, not just in the innovation sector. So let's hope that's the case.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate your perspective. Best wishes.
My pleasure.
Thank you so.
Thank you for having me.